The summer heat shimmered across the dusty main street of Fort Stanton, New Mexico. As 15-year-old Violet Graham stood frozen in place, her heart thundering in her chest like a stampede while Henry Tucker's lips pressed against hers for the very first time, a stolen moment behind the general store that would change the course of both their lives forever. The year was 1871, and Fort Stanton was little more than a military outpost surrounded by a small but growing settlement in Lincoln County. The fort itself stood proud against the rugged New Mexico landscape, its adobe and stone structures a testament to man's determination to tame the wild frontier. The townsfolk, a mix of military families, ranchers, merchants, and drifters, lived in the shadow of the surrounding mountains, their days marked by hard work and simple pleasures. Violet pulled away first, her cheeks flushed crimson as she stared up at Henry, the blacksmith's son whose strong hands could bend metal but trembled now as they rested on her waist. "I shouldn't have done that," Henry whispered, though the smile tugging at his lips betrayed his lack of regret. Violet's fingers reached up to touch her tingling lips. "No, you shouldn't have." But her eyes, bright with excitement, told a different story. "Your pa would have my hide if he knew," Henry said, glancing nervously toward the general store where Mr. Graham was tallying the day's earnings. "Then he best not find out." Violet smoothed her calico dress, her hands still shaking. "I should get back. Ma will be wondering where I've gone off to." Henry nodded, reluctantly letting his hands fall away from her waist. "Will I see you at the social on Saturday? You know I'll be there." Violet took a step back, memorizing the way the late afternoon sun caught in his dark hair, how his blue eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Don't be late. Wouldn't dream of it." With one last glance over her shoulder, Violet hurried back to the store, her mind spinning with possibilities, with dreams that seemed suddenly within reach. She couldn't know then that those dreams would take 7 long years to realize, or how much would change before they did. Life in Fort Stanton continued at its steady frontier pace. The military presence provided some stability, while the surrounding ranchlands drew settlers hoping to carve out their piece of the American dream. The Graham family had arrived 3 years prior when Violet's father, Edgar Graham, decided to open a general store after years of working for others back east. The move had been difficult for Violet and her mother Beatrice, but they had adapted to frontier life with determination. The Tucker family had deeper roots in the territory. Henry's father, Jonathan Tucker, had established his blacksmith shop when Fort Stanton was rebuilt after the Civil War. His skill with metal was renowned throughout the county, and Henry had been apprenticing with him since he was 12. Saturday evenings in Fort Stanton typically meant a community gathering at the small town hall, simple affairs where people could forget the hardships of frontier life for a few hours of music, dancing, and socializing. These gatherings were especially important to the younger residents, providing rare opportunities for courtship under the watchful eyes of parents and neighbors. When Saturday arrived, Violet spent extra time preparing, much to her mother's amusement. My, Beatrice remarked as she watched Violet pin up her chestnut hair. "One might think you're hoping to catch someone's eye tonight." Violet avoided her mother's knowing gaze in the small mirror. "I just want to look presentable, Ma." Beatrice adjusted the collar of Violet's best dress, a pale blue cotton that brought out the green in her eyes. "Would this have anything to do with the Tucker boy? I've noticed him watching you at church." Heat crept up Violet's neck. "Henry and I are just friends." "Well, just friends or not, remember that you're still a young lady with a reputation to maintain." Beatrice's tone was gentle but firm. "Your father and I expect you to behave accordingly." "Yes, Ma." The social was already in full swing when the Graham family arrived. Lanterns hung from the rafters of the town hall, casting a warm glow over the assembled townsfolk. A small group of musicians played lively tunes while couples danced, and others clustered in conversation around the edges of the room. Violet's eyes scanned the crowd, disappointment washing over her when she didn't immediately spot Henry. Her father nodded toward a group of merchants, excusing himself to join their conversation, while her mother was quickly pulled into a discussion with the other ladies about an upcoming quilting bee. Left to her own devices, Violet made her way to where some of the other young people had gathered near the refreshment table. She was just reaching for a cup of punch when a warm voice spoke close to her ear. "I told you I wouldn't be late." Violet turned to find Henry standing beside her, looking more handsome than she remembered in his clean white shirt and dark vest. His usually unruly hair had been tamed with water, though one stubborn lock still fell across his forehead. "You nearly were," she replied, trying to sound casual despite her racing pulse. Henry grinned. "Had to finish shoeing Mr. Peterson's horse. The old man was in a state about getting it done today." He glanced toward the dance floor. "Would you like to dance, Miss Graham?" The formality of his address, spoken just loudly enough for those nearby to hear, made Violet smile. "I would be delighted, Mr. Tucker." As Henry led her to the dance floor, she was acutely aware of her father's eyes following them. Edgar Graham was protective of his only daughter, and while the Tuckers were a respectable family, he had made it clear that Violet was too young for serious courtship. The music shifted to a waltz, and Henry placed his hand respectfully at her waist, leaving a proper distance between them as they began to move with the music. "Your father looks ready to march over here and separate us," Henry murmured, nodding subtly toward where Edgar stood watching them with narrowed eyes. "He's just being a father," Violet replied. "He thinks I'm still a child." "Aren't we, though?" Henry's expression grew thoughtful. 15 is mighty young in a place like this, too young for." He trailed off, both of them knowing he was referring to their kiss. "Too young for what?" she challenged quietly. "For making promises we might not be able to keep." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I'm going to be leaving Fort Stanton soon, Violet." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Leaving? Why?" "Pa says I've learned all I can from him. He's arranged for me to apprentice with a master gunsmith in Santa Fe. It's a good opportunity, one that could set me up proper for the future." "When?" The single word was all she could manage. 2 weeks from now." Henry's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "I'll be gone at least 2 years." The music continued around them, but Violet barely heard it. 2 years seemed an eternity. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I only found out yesterday. Pa's been arranging it for months without saying a word." His expression softened. "I didn't want to spoil tonight by telling you, but I couldn't keep it from you either." They danced in silence for several moments, Violet's mind racing with the implications. She'd known Henry since they'd arrived in Fort Stanton. They'd become friends almost immediately, their friendship gradually deepening into something more as they grew older. The idea of him leaving left a hollow feeling in her chest. "I'll write to you," Henry said finally. "Every week if you'll let me. Pa won't approve. Then I'll send them to Mrs. Lawson at the post office and you can collect them when you go into town." He gave her a hopeful smile. "I'm coming back, Violet, when I've learned enough, made something of myself. Will you wait?" Before Violet could answer, the music ended and they were joined by other young people from town. The moment for private conversation had passed, but Henry's question hung between them for the remainder of the evening. It wasn't until the social was ending and families were preparing to leave that Violet managed to slip away briefly. She found Henry outside, staring up at the star-filled sky. "Yes," she said simply as she came to stand beside him. Henry turned to her, confusion giving way to understanding. Yes, you'll wait, Violet nodded, her heart too full for many words. I'll wait. The smile that spread across his face was worth the uncertainty ahead. I'll make you proud, Violet Graham, I promise you that. I know you will. She glanced back toward the town hall, knowing her parents would be looking for her. I should go. Henry caught her hand, pressing something small and cool into her palm. Something to remember me by. Looking down, Violet found a small silver pendant, a simple heart with delicate engravings around the edge. Henry, I can't accept this. You can and you will, he insisted. I made it myself. It's not fancy, but it's perfect. Violet closed her fingers around it, fighting back tears. I'll treasure it. A call from inside pulled them back to reality. With one last lingering look, they rejoined the others, each carrying a secret promise in their heart. The following 2 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and whispered promises. They were careful, knowing that discovery would only make their separation more difficult. When the day of Henry's departure finally arrived, Violet couldn't even be there to see him off, as her father had insisted she help at the store. From the shop window, she watched the stagecoach pull away, taking Henry toward his future in Santa Fe. Only the small silver pendant hidden beneath her collar gave her comfort, a tangible reminder of his promise to return. True to his word, Henry's first letter arrived just 3 weeks later, addressed to Violet in care of Mrs. Lawson. The postmistress, a kindly widow who had taken a liking to Violet, understood young love well enough to participate in their innocent deception. Your correspondence has arrived, dear, Mrs. Lawson said with a wink when Violet came to collect the mail for her father. The letters became her lifeline over the months that followed. Henry wrote of Santa Fe, so much larger and more civilized than Fort Stanton, and of his apprenticeship with Mr. Hollister, the gunsmith. His descriptions painted pictures in Violet's mind of elegant Spanish architecture, bustling markets, and the workshop where he was learning to craft precision weapons. In turn, Violet wrote of life in Fort Stanton, of the small changes in the growing settlement, of her increasing responsibilities at the store as she matured. The first year of their separation brought changes to Fort Stanton. The military presence increased following renewed conflicts with local Apache bands, bringing more soldiers and the businesses that catered to them. Edgar Graham's store prospered, and he began to speak of expansion. We could build a proper house, he told his wife and daughter one evening over dinner. Something befitting our standing in the community. We've been living above the store long enough. Beatrice's eyes lit up at the prospect. With a proper parlor for entertaining. And bedrooms enough that Violet needn't sleep in the alcove, Edgar agreed. Perhaps even room for grandchildren someday, when the time comes. Violet lowered her gaze to her plate, her thoughts immediately turning to Henry. At 16, she understood better what her father meant and that he had very different ideas about her future than she did. The Reynolds boy has been asking after you, her father continued, confirming her suspicions. His father's ranch is doing well, could be a good match in a year or two. Stephen Reynolds, Violet couldn't keep the dismay from her voice. Pa, he's 23 and has the personality of a fence post. Violet, her mother gave her a reproving look. That's unkind. But true, Violet muttered. Edgar frowned. You're getting to the age where you need to think practically about these things. Young ladies in territories like this can't afford to be too choosy. I'm only 16, Pa. I'm not looking to get married anytime soon. No, but it doesn't hurt to consider possibilities. Her father's expression softened slightly. I only want what's best for you, Violet. Security, a good home, a respectable husband. Violet nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing. Her parents didn't know about her correspondence with Henry, and she intended to keep it that way until he returned. If he returned. That night, as she penned her weekly letter to Henry, Violet found herself questioning the promise they'd made. They had been so young, still were, in many ways. Was it fair to either of them to cling to childhood feelings? Henry was experiencing a wider world in Santa Fe, meeting new people, learning a skilled trade. What if he had already moved on? Yet each letter she received reaffirmed his affection. He spoke of the future, of plans to return to Fort Stanton with the skills to establish his own business. He asked about changes in the town, about potential locations for a shop. These were not the words of someone who had forgotten his promise. And so Violet continued to wait, her childhood crush maturing into something deeper and more enduring as the months passed. The second year of Henry's absence brought further changes. Violet's 17th birthday came and went, marked by a small celebration and increased pressure from her father to consider suitors. The new Graham house was completed, a handsome two-story structure on the edge of town that reflected Edgar's success. Violet now had her own bedroom, a luxury she had never known, but she would have traded it in a heartbeat for Henry's return. "The Matheson boy was looking at you in church again," her mother remarked one Sunday as they walked home. "He's a fine young man with prospects." "He's also courting Mary Wilson," Violet replied, having no interest in Josiah Matheson or any of the other young men her parents kept pointing out. Beatrice sighed. "You can't wait forever, Violet. A young woman needs to secure her future." If only they knew she was trying to do exactly that, Violet thought. Henry's letters had grown more specific about his plans. His apprenticeship would end in 6 months, and he had saved nearly enough to start his own business. Mr. Hollister had offered to help him acquire the tools and materials he would need. "I'll be back before the first snow next winter," he had written in his most recent letter. "Wait for me, Violet, just a little longer." And she would, no matter how many eligible young men her parents paraded before her. Henry Tucker had her heart, and distance had only made her more certain of it. Spring of 1873 brought an outbreak of influenza to Fort Stanton. The illness swept through the settlement with alarming speed, filling the small infirmary to capacity and claiming several lives, particularly among the very young and the elderly. The Graham family was not spared. First Edgar fell ill, followed quickly by Beatrice. Violet, who had just turned 18, found herself nursing her parents while trying to keep the store operating with the help of a young clerk named William. "You should close up for a few days, Miss Graham," William suggested after a particularly busy morning. "No one would think less of you with your folks so sick." "We can't afford to," Violet replied, tallying the day's receipts with tired eyes. "Too many people depend on us for supplies, especially now with so many ill." The truth was more complicated. The store was their livelihood, and doctors' bills were mounting. Dr. Fairfield was doing his best, but medicines were costly, and he had to send to Santa Fe for additional supplies. Violet couldn't afford to lose even a day's income. She wrote to Henry of her troubles, finding solace in sharing her fears with someone who understood her so well, even from a distance. His reply came faster than usual, filled with concern and encouragement. "If I could be there with you now, I would," he wrote. "Hold fast, Violet. You're stronger than you know." Those words sustained her through the worst days of the epidemic. Edgar recovered slowly, his robust constitution eventually overcoming the illness. Beatrice, however, grew progressively weaker. On a cool morning in late April, Violet woke to find her mother's fever finally broken, bringing a rush of hope. But Dr. Fairfield's expression remained grave when he examined Beatrice later that day. "The fever has done its damage, I'm afraid," he told Violet and Edgar privately. Her lungs are compromised. She needs rest, good food, and clean air. Will she recover? Edgar asked, his voice rough with emotion. Dr. Fairfield hesitated. With proper care and time, she may improve, but she'll never be as strong as she was before. The news changed everything for the Graham family. Edgar, still recovering himself, had to rely heavily on Violet to manage both the store and the household. The responsibility fell squarely on her young shoulders, leaving little time for anything else, including dreams of Henry Tucker. Her letters became less frequent, shorter when she did write. Henry's replies remained steady, but they contained a new note of concern. "You sound exhausted, Violet," he wrote. "I worry about you taking on so much. Is there no one to help?" There wasn't, not really. Fort Stanton had its share of kind people, but everyone had their own burdens to bear. The ladies from church brought food occasionally, and William took on more responsibility at the store, but the day-to-day care of her mother and management of the household fell to Violet. Summer came, bringing heat that made Beatrice's breathing more labored. Dr. Fairfield suggested they consider moving her to a higher elevation or a drier climate, perhaps Arizona or Colorado, where the air might be kinder to her lungs. "I can't leave the store," Edgar protested. "Everything we have is invested here." "Then perhaps Mrs. Graham could go to stay with relatives," the doctor suggested, but Beatrice had no close family willing or able to take her in. The Grahams had been on their own since coming west, a fact that had seemed a point of pride during good times but now felt like a terrible vulnerability. "We'll manage here," Edgar decided finally. "We'll make whatever changes are needed to the house." Violet wrote to Henry of this decision, her frustration evident even through her careful penmanship. His reply was unexpected. "I'm coming back sooner than planned," he wrote. "Mr. Hollister agrees I've learned what I need. I'll be on the stage to Fort Stanton by the end of August." The news should have filled Violet with joy, but instead she felt a complicated mix of emotions. She had changed in the past 2 years, grown up faster than she should have had to, shouldered responsibilities that left little room for youthful romance. What if Henry found her different from the girl he remembered? What if she found him changed, and there was her family to consider? Her mother needed her, her father relied on her. How could she even think about her own happiness when so much depended on her? Nevertheless, as August drew to a close, Violet found herself watching for the stagecoach with increasing anticipation. Henry had written that he would arrive on the last Friday of the month, and despite her misgivings, she couldn't deny the quickening of her pulse whenever she thought of seeing him again. Friday dawned clear and hot, the kind of late summer day that shimmered with heat by mid-morning. Violet rose early, completing her chores with unusual efficiency before spending extra time on her appearance. Her mother noticed, of course. "You look lovely today," Beatrice remarked from where she rested on the parlor sofa. "Is there a special occasion I've forgotten?" Violet smoothed her skirt, one of her newer dresses, a soft lavender that complimented her eyes. "No, Ma. I just felt like making an effort today." Beatrice's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled. Would this have anything to do with the stagecoach that's due in this afternoon? Violet stilled. "Why would you think that?" Mrs. Lawson mentioned a young man might be returning from Santa Fe today. A certain blacksmith's son, perhaps. When Violet didn't immediately respond, Beatrice continued, "Did you think I didn't know about the letters, dear? Mrs. Lawson and I have been friends for 20 years. Heat flooded Violet's cheeks. "You never said anything." "Neither did you." Beatrice's tone held no accusation, only gentle understanding. "I was young once too, you know. I remember what it's like to have a secret love." "We were just children when he left," Violet said softly. I don't even know if what I feel now is real or just a memory I've clung to. You'll know when you see him, her mother assured her. The heart doesn't lie about such things. What about Pa? He has plans for me that don't include Henry Tucker. Beatrice's expression grew more serious. Your father wants security for you, especially now that our future seems less certain, but he also wants your happiness. She reached for Violet's hand. Life is short and often harder than we expect, my dear. I've learned that all too well this year. If Henry Tucker makes you happy, then you must at least give that happiness a chance. Tears prickled at Violet's eyes. I'm afraid, Ma, everything's so different now. Of course it is. You're not children anymore, but that doesn't mean what you feel is any less real. Beatrice squeezed her hand. Go meet that stagecoach, Violet. Your father won't be back from his business in Lincoln until tomorrow, and I'll be fine on my own for a few hours. Violet hesitated, torn between duty and desire. Go, Beatrice insisted. Before I change my mind about encouraging this romance behind your father's back. With a grateful smile, Violet kissed her mother's cheek and hurried out, her heart lighter than it had been in months. The stagecoach was scheduled to arrive at 3 o'clock, but delays were common on the rough roads between Santa Fe and Fort Stanton. Violet tried to occupy herself with errands, stopping by the store to check on William, then visiting the mercantile to order supplies for the house. At 2:30, she made her way to the stagecoach depot, trying not to appear too eager as she browsed the window of a nearby shop. The depot was busy with the usual Friday afternoon crowd, ranchers in town for supplies, soldiers from the fort collecting mail, townsfolk waiting for packages or visitors. 3 o'clock came and went with no sign of the stage. Violet began to worry that it might be delayed until the next day, a not uncommon occurrence when weather or road conditions were poor. But just as she was considering returning home to check on her mother, a shout went up from the edge of town. Stage is coming. The lumbering coach appeared through the heat haze, drawn by 4 dust-covered horses. It pulled up to the depot with a squeal of brakes and a cloud of dust, the driver calling out greetings to familiar faces as he set the brake. Violet hung back, suddenly unsure. What if Henry had changed his mind? What if he wasn't on this stage at all? What if the door of the coach swung open and passengers began to disembark? A well-dressed businessman, a middle-aged woman with a young girl, an older man who was greeted enthusiastically by a waiting family. And then, Henry Tucker stepped down from the coach. He was taller than she remembered, his shoulders broader, his face more defined. The boy she had kissed behind the general store had become a man, one whose presence commanded attention even in his travel-worn clothes. He paused, scanning the crowd, and Violet felt herself rooted to the spot, unable to move even as her heart recognized him instantly. Then his gaze found her, and the smile that spread across his face was exactly as she remembered, warm, genuine, lighting up his blue eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Violet," he said, the single word carrying years of longing as he crossed the distance between them in long strides. She meant to greet him properly, to offer her hand or a polite word of welcome. Instead, she found herself stepping forward into his embrace, propriety forgotten as his arms encircled her. "You're here," she whispered against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, leather and soap and something uniquely Henry. "You really came back. I promised I would." He drew back slightly to look at her, his expression a mix of wonder and happiness. "Let me see you." Violet felt herself blush under his scrutiny. "I must look a sight. It's been such a busy day." "You look beautiful." His gaze was reverent, even more so than I remembered. Someone cleared their throat nearby, reminding them they were very much in public. Violet stepped back reluctantly, aware of curious glances from passers-by. "We should probably not cause a scandal within 5 minutes of your return," she said with a small laugh. Henry grinned. "Probably wise. Is there somewhere we can talk? I have so much to tell you." "The cafe might be best," Violet suggested, thinking of her mother at home. "Public enough to be proper, but quiet enough for conversation." As they walked toward the small cafe at the end of the main street, Henry collected his bags from the stage and slung them over his shoulder. "I'm staying at the hotel for now, until I can find more permanent lodgings." "Your parents' home is still here," Violet pointed out. "Though your father spends most of his time at the smithy these days since your mother passed." Henry nodded solemnly. "Pa wrote about that. I wish I could have been here for her funeral." "She understood why you couldn't be," Violet assured him. "She was proud of you for pursuing your trade." The cafe was nearly empty at this hour, the lunch crowd gone and dinner still hours away. They chose a table by the window, ordering coffee from the proprietress, Mrs. Hendricks, who raised her eyebrows at the sight of them together but made no comment. Once they were alone, Henry reached across the table to take Violet's hand. "I've imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that I'm here, I hardly know where to begin." "Tell me about Santa Fe," Violet suggested. "About what you learned, what you plan to do now." Henry's face lit up as he described his apprenticeship, the intricacies of gunsmithing that went far beyond the basic metalwork he had learned from his father. He spoke of the tools and materials he had acquired, the designs he hoped to implement, the business he planned to establish. "I've saved enough to lease a small shop," he explained. "Mr. Hollister helped me connect with suppliers, and I've already secured a few contracts with ranchers who need reliable firearms." "You've thought of everything," Violet said, impressed by his thoroughness. "I had to." His expression grew more serious. "I needed to prove I could provide a good life here for us if you'll still have me." The directness of his statement caught Violet off guard. "Henry, we've been apart for 2 years. We were children when you left." "We were," he agreed. "But I never stopped thinking about you, Violet. Every letter you wrote, every plan I made, it was all with the hope that what we felt was real." His fingers tightened around hers. Was I wrong? Violet thought of her mother's words earlier that day. "The heart doesn't lie about such things." "No," she admitted softly. "You weren't wrong, but things are complicated now. My mother has been ill, and my father depends on me to help with both her care and the store." "I know. Your letters told me how difficult it's been." Henry's gaze was steady. "I'm not asking you to choose between your family and me, Violet. I'm offering to help shoulder those burdens with you." "My father has other ideas about my future," she confessed. "He doesn't know about our correspondence, and he's been encouraging me to consider offers from more established men." "Men like Stephen Reynolds." Henry's jaw tightened slightly. Violet nodded. "Among others." "And do you want to marry Stephen Reynolds?" "Of course not." The very idea was absurd. "But my father believes security is what matters most, especially now with Ma's health uncertain." Henry leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Then let me prove to him that I can offer that security. I'm not the boy who left Fort Stanton, Violet. I have skills, savings, and solid prospects. I can support a family now." A family. The word hung between them, full of promise and possibility. "Give me a chance," Henry continued when she didn't immediately respond. "Let me speak to your father when he returns." Violet hesitated, weighing the risks against the hope that had rekindled in her heart since seeing Henry again. "He's due back tomorrow evening from Lincoln." "Then I'll call on Sunday properly to state my intentions." Henry's expression was determined. "Unless you'd rather I didn't?" "No," Violet said quickly, certainty finally overcoming doubt. "No, I want you to come." The smile that spread across Henry's face was worth any risk. "Good." Because I've waited 2 years to begin my life with you, Violet Graham, and I don't intend to wait much longer." They lingered over their coffee until Violet reluctantly acknowledged she needed to return home to check on her mother. Henry walked her to the edge of town, where propriety dictated they should part, her family's new house being too far for him to escort her without raising eyebrows. "Sunday, then," he said as they prepared to part. "Sunday," she confirmed. 1 o'clock. Ma usually rests then, and Pa will be home from church." Henry reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light. "Until then." Violet watched him walk back toward town, her heart fuller than it had been in years. Whatever happened with her father, she knew now what her heart had always wanted, since that first kiss behind the general store. Sunday arrived with agonizing slowness. Violet had told her mother about Henry's intended visit, and Beatrice had agreed to help smooth the way with Edgar. "Your father can be stubborn," she warned, "but he's not unreasonable. Just let Henry state his case without interruption." Church service that morning was an exercise in patience. Violet was acutely aware of Henry sitting with his father several pews ahead, of the curious glances from townsfolk who had noticed their reunion at the stage-coach depot, of her father's obliviousness to the tension thrumming through her body. After the service, many parishioners stopped to greet Henry and welcome him back to Fort Stanton. Edgar Graham was among them, shaking Henry's hand with no idea of the young man's intentions toward his daughter. "Good to see you back, son," Edgar said. "Your father must be pleased to have another pair of hands at the forge." "Actually, sir, I'll be opening my own gunsmithing shop," Henry replied respectfully. "I've completed my apprenticeship in Santa Fe." Edgar looked impressed despite himself. "Is that so? Well, good luck to you. A skilled trade is always valuable in these parts." "Thank you, sir. I hope to speak with you further about it soon." Henry's eyes flicked briefly to Violet, who stood a few steps away. Edgar nodded, already turning to greet another parishioner. Of course. Stop by the store any time." By 1 o'clock, Violet was a bundle of nerves. She had changed her dress twice, finally settling on a becoming blue gown that her mother assured her brought out her eyes. Beatrice had retired to her room as planned, leaving Violet to answer the door when Henry's knock came precisely at the appointed time. He stood on their porch in his Sunday best, hat in hand, looking as nervous as she felt. "Good afternoon, Miss Graham." The formality made her smile despite her anxiety. "Good afternoon, Mr. Tucker. Please come in." Edgar Graham was in the parlor, reading a newspaper and enjoying his Sunday pipe. He looked up in surprise as Violet showed Henry in. "Tucker, didn't expect to see you today." He folded his paper, gesturing to a chair. "What brings you by?" Henry remained standing, his posture straight. "Mr. Graham, I've come to speak with you on a matter of importance." Something in his tone caught Edgar's attention. He set his pipe aside, studying the young man with new awareness. "I see. And what matter would that be?" "Your daughter, sir." Henry glanced at Violet, drawing strength from her presence. "I've come to formally ask your permission to court her." Edgar's eyebrows shot up. He looked between Henry and Violet, understanding dawning in his expression. "Is this why you've been turning down every eligible young man in the county?" he asked his daughter. Violet nodded, her voice steadier than she expected. "Yes, Pa. Henry and I have had an understanding since before he left for Santa Fe." "An understanding?" Edgar frowned. "You were 15 when he left, barely more than a child." "We were young," Henry acknowledged, "but our feelings haven't changed. If anything, they've grown stronger during our time apart." Edgar leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "And how exactly did this understanding continue while you were in Santa Fe?" "I don't recall any letters coming for Violet." Violet exchanged a glance with Henry, knowing the moment for complete honesty had arrived. "Mrs. Lawson held them for me at the post office," she admitted. "We've been corresponding for the past 2 years. Behind my back." Edgar's tone hardened. "Both of you deceiving me all this time." "We didn't mean to deceive you, Mr. Graham," Henry said quickly, "but I knew I had nothing to offer Violet when I left. I wanted to prove myself first, to establish a trade and save enough to start my own business." "And have you?" Edgar challenged. "Or are you expecting to support a wife on dreams and promises?" Henry straightened. "I've completed my apprenticeship with one of the finest gunsmiths in the territory. I have savings enough to lease a shop here in town and stock it with materials. I've already secured contracts with several ranchers for custom work, and Mr. Hollister in Santa Fe has agreed to refer clients to me." His voice grew more confident as he continued. "I can provide for Violet, sir. Not in luxury, perhaps, but in comfort and security." Edgar's expression remained skeptical. "Gunsmithing is a skilled trade, I'll grant you that, but it's also dependent on a steady stream of customers. Fort Stanton isn't Santa Fe." "I'm aware of that, sir. But with the military presence here and the growing number of ranches in the area, there's demand for quality firearms and skilled repairs." Henry took a breath. "I wouldn't have come back if I wasn't certain I could build a successful business. And what about Violet's responsibilities here?" Edgar gestured around them. "Her mother needs her. The store needs her. Have you considered that?" "I have, sir," Henry replied solemnly. "I'm not asking to take Violet away immediately. I understand your family's circumstances. I'm asking for your blessing to court her properly, with the intention of marriage when the time is right for all concerned." Edgar fell silent, considering. Violet held her breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Pa," she said finally, when she couldn't bear the silence any longer. "I've never asked you for anything like this before, but I'm asking now. Give Henry a chance to prove himself to you as he has to me." Edgar's gaze softened as he looked at his daughter. "You really care for this young man, don't you?" "I do," Violet said simply. "More than I can say." After what seemed an eternity, Edgar sighed deeply. "I suppose I can't pretend I didn't see this coming in some form or another. You've always been stubborn when you set your mind to something, Violet." He turned his attention back to Henry. "I'll allow you to call on my daughter, Tucker. But I expect your intentions to remain honorable, and I expect to see evidence of this business you're planning to establish." Relief washed over Violet, so profound she felt momentarily light-headed. "Thank you, sir," Henry said earnestly. "I promise you won't regret your decision." "We'll see about that." Edgar stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Now, I believe Mrs. Graham would probably like to meet the young man who's been secretly corresponding with her daughter." "She already knows, Pa," Violet admitted. "She figured it out ages ago." Edgar's startled expression gave way to reluctant amusement. "Seems I'm the only one who was in the dark. Well, go on then. I'm sure your mother is only pretending to rest while she waits to hear the outcome of this conversation." He was right, of course. Beatrice was sitting up in bed when they entered, her face lighting up at the sight of them together. "I take it Edgar didn't run you off with his shotgun?" she asked Henry with a smile. "No, madam," Henry replied, relaxing slightly in her welcoming presence. "Though I can't say he was entirely pleased about our correspondence." "He'll come around," Beatrice assured him. "My husband appreciates determination and hard work above all else. Show him you possess both and you'll win his respect." "I intend to, Mrs. Graham." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Violet's life, despite the continued challenges of her mother's health and her responsibilities at the store. Henry secured a small building on the edge of town for his gunsmith shop, working tirelessly to renovate and outfit it. Edgar, true to his practical nature, stopped by regularly to inspect Henry's progress, offering grudging approval as the shop took shape. "The boy knows his craft," he admitted to Violet one evening after returning from such a visit. "Those custom triggers he's designing for the cavalry officers are impressive work." Violet smiled, recognizing the shift in her father's attitude. "Does that mean you're warming to the idea of him as a son-in-law?" Edgar harumphed, not quite ready to concede so much. "It means he might not be as impractical a choice as I first thought." By the time autumn painted the surrounding hills in gold and crimson, Henry's shop was open for business. Word of his skills spread quickly among the military men stationed at the fort, bringing a steady stream of customers. The sign above the door, "Tucker's Fine Firearms," had been Violet's gift, commissioned from a traveling painter passing through town. Their courtship proceeded with proper decorum under the watchful eyes of Fort Stanton. Henry called at the Graham house every Sunday after church, occasionally joining them for dinner when invited. On Wednesday evenings, he would escort Violet to the small lending library or to community gatherings, always returning her home at a respectable hour. These public appearances, however, were only part of their time together. Henry often stopped by the store during quiet afternoons, helping Violet with inventory or simply keeping her company while she worked. These moments, surrounded by sacks of flour and shelves of dry goods, were when they truly reconnected, sharing dreams and plans for their future. "I've been looking at that parcel of land just past the creek," Henry told her one October afternoon as he helped her stock a high shelf. "There's enough room for a house and a small workshop, far enough from town for privacy but close enough for convenience." "It sounds perfect," Violet said, trying not to sound too eager. They hadn't formally discussed marriage timing yet, though both knew it was their destination. "Your father mentioned your mother might do better in a drier climate," Henry continued cautiously. "If they decided to move to Arizona or Colorado, what would you want to do?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know. I've been so focused on helping them, I haven't really thought beyond that." Henry set down the can he was holding, turning to face her fully. "I'm not trying to rush you, Violet. I just want you to know that whatever your family decides, I'm here. If they stay, we'll build our life around helping them. If they go, you can choose to go with them until they're settled and I'll wait. Or, she prompted when he hesitated. "Or we could marry sooner, establish our home here, perhaps even help them financially if they need to relocate for your mother's health." He took her hand. "I just want you to know you have options." Violet squeezed his hand, touched by his consideration. "Thank you. It means everything to know I'm not alone in these decisions anymore." As winter approached, Beatrice's health deteriorated with the cold weather. Dr. Fairfield became a regular visitor to the Graham household, his expression growing more concerned with each visit. "She needs a milder climate," he insisted during one particularly difficult week. "The winter here will be too harsh on her lungs." Edgar finally conceded the point. "We'll go to Arizona," he decided. "My cousin in Prescott has written about the dry air there. Says it's done wonders for his rheumatism." The news sent Violet into a tailspin of conflicting emotions. Concern for her mother warred with the thought of leaving Henry just when their future seemed within reach. "Go with them," Henry urged when she confided her turmoil. "Help them get settled. I'll still be here when you return." "But what if Ma needs me to stay?" Violet's eyes filled with tears. "What if this separation becomes like the last 1 year instead of months?" Henry cupped her face in his hands, his expression serious. "Then I'll come to you. I can establish a shop in Prescott as easily as here. I've built something in Fort Stanton, yes, but none of it matters if you're not with me." His words settled something in Violet's heart. Whatever happened, they would face it together. Christmas came, bringing a brief respite from worry. The Graham house was decorated simply, but warmly, and Henry joined them for Christmas dinner, a sign of his increasingly accepted place in their family circle. Edgar had softened considerably toward his daughter's suitor, especially as Henry's business continued to thrive. After dinner, while Beatrice rested and Edgar dozed by the fire, Henry led Violet to the porch, where the clear winter night spread a canopy of stars above them. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small package from his pocket. Violet unwrapped it carefully to reveal a delicate silver ring set with a small but perfect sapphire. "Henry," she breathed, "it's beautiful." "It's not an official engagement ring," he explained quickly. "Not yet. I haven't spoken formally to your father about that, and with your family's plans to move to Arizona in the spring, it didn't seem right to rush that conversation." He took the ring, holding it between them. "Think of it as a promise that no matter what happens in the coming months, whether you're in Arizona or here, whether it's weeks or months before we're together again, my heart belongs to you, Violet Graham." Tears spilled down Violet's cheeks as she held out her right hand, allowing him to slide the ring onto her finger. "And mine to you, Henry Tucker." The rest of the winter passed in a blur of preparation. Edgar sold the store to his clerk William, who had proven himself capable and ambitious over the years. The house was put up for sale, though Edgar decided to retain ownership until they were certain of their permanent plans in Arizona. Henry threw himself into his work, taking on as many commissions as possible to build up his savings. Whatever the future held, whether establishing a new shop in Prescott or maintaining 2 households for a time, he wanted to be prepared. February brought a heavy snowfall that blanketed Fort Stanton in white. The stage-coach routes were temporarily suspended, and the town settled into the quiet isolation of deep winter. For Violet, it was a bittersweet time, a last chance to create memories in the place that had been her home since childhood, with the man who had captured her heart. One clear afternoon, when the snow had hardened enough for easy walking, Henry persuaded Violet to accompany him to the parcel of land he'd mentioned months earlier. "I want you to see it while it's still ours to dream about," he explained as they trudged through the snow, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. The property looked different under its winter blanket, but Violet could still appreciate its potential: the gentle slope that would provide a view from a front porch, the cluster of pine trees that would offer shade in summer, the frozen creek that would provide water and a pleasant sound when thawed. "It's perfect, Henry." She turned in a slow circle, imagining the house that might have stood there, the life they might have built. "It still can be," he said, reading her thoughts. "Maybe not now, maybe not for a year or more, but I want you to know I'm keeping this dream alive for us." Violet smiled, touched by his certainty. "I believe you, and I'll hold onto that dream too, no matter where we are." March arrived with warming temperatures and final preparations for the Graham family's departure. The house had sold quickly to a new officer assigned to the fort, and most of their possessions had been packed for shipment to Prescott. Edgar had written ahead to his cousin, who had secured temporary accommodations for them. The night before their departure, Henry came to the nearly empty house for a final dinner, a simple affair served on borrowed dishes, as their own had already been packed. "I spoke with the stagecoach office today," he told them as they ate. "The route to Prescott is well established now. I can make the journey in about 2 weeks once you're settled, and let me know it's a good time to visit." "You're welcome anytime, son," Edgar said, surprising everyone with the warmth in his voice. "We'll have a spare room ready for you." After dinner, Henry asked for a private word with Edgar. The two men went into what had been the study, now empty save for two chairs. Violet waited anxiously in the hallway, knowing what Henry intended to discuss. When they emerged some 20 minutes later, both men looked solemn but satisfied. "Your young man has asked for my blessing to marry you when the time is right," Edgar told Violet, his voice gruff with emotion. "I've given it, with the understanding that you'll both wait until your mother's situation is stable." Violet embraced her father, tears threatening. "Thank you, Pa." "He's proven himself a man of his word," Edgar said, patting her back awkwardly. "And he clearly loves you very much." The stagecoach departed at dawn the next morning, carrying the Graham family toward their new beginning in Prescott. Violet's last sight of Fort Stanton was Henry standing in the morning light, his hand raised in farewell, his expression a promise that this goodbye was temporary. The journey to Arizona Territory was long and arduous, particularly for Beatrice, who struggled with the constant jostling and dust. But when they finally arrived in Prescott in early April, the change in her was almost immediate. The dry, clear air eased her breathing, and within weeks, she was stronger than she had been in months. Edgar's cousin Nathan welcomed them warmly, helping them settle into a small but comfortable house on the outskirts of town. Prescott was larger than Fort Stanton, with a more established business district and territorial government offices that brought a steady stream of people through the area. Violet wrote to Henry regularly, describing their new surroundings and her mother's improving health. His letters in return spoke of his continuing business success and his plans to visit as soon as they were ready for him. By June, Beatrice was well enough that Violet felt she could invite Henry without worrying about her mother's care dominating their time together. His response was immediate. He would close his shop for 2 weeks and depart on the next available stagecoach. The day of his arrival dawned clear and bright, typical of the Arizona summer. Violet rose early, spending extra time with her appearance, wanting everything to be perfect for their reunion after 3 months apart. "You look lovely, dear," Beatrice said as Violet twirled in her new blue dress, a slightly lighter fabric than she would have worn in New Mexico, better suited to the Arizona heat. "You think he'll notice I've changed my hair?" Violet patted the new arrangement, with soft curls framing her face instead of the severe bun she'd worn during the difficult winter months. "I think he'll notice everything about you," her mother replied with a smile. "Just as you'll notice everything about him." The stagecoach was due at noon, and Violet and her father went to meet it, leaving Beatrice resting comfortably at home. The depot was busy, as Prescott had become an important stop on the route between California and the Eastern Territories. When the coach rolled in, right on schedule, Violet's heart pounded so hard she was sure her father could hear it. Passengers began to disembark: a family with small children, a well-dressed businessman, 2 women traveling together. And then Henry, looking travel-worn but wonderfully familiar in his brown duster and wide-brimmed hat. His face lit up when he spotted her, and in 3 long strides, he was before her, propriety be damned, as he swept her into an embrace that lifted her feet from the ground. "I missed you," he murmured against her hair before setting her gently back down. "I missed you too," she whispered, aware of her father's presence but unable to contain her joy. Edgar cleared his throat. "Welcome to Prescott, Tucker. Good journey." Henry straightened, offering his hand to Edgar. "As good as can be expected, sir. The last leg was particularly dusty." "Always is," Edgar agreed. "Come on then. Beatrice is anxious to see you, and I expect you could use a decent meal and a wash." The 2 weeks of Henry's visit passed all too quickly. He charmed Beatrice with stories of Fort Stanton after their departure, impressed Edgar with his knowledge of Prescott's business opportunities, and spent every possible moment with Violet, exploring their new surroundings and making plans for their future. "Your mother seems much improved," he observed as they walked along Granite Creek one evening, the setting sun painting the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. "The change has been remarkable," Violet agreed. "Doctor Mitchell says she may never be as strong as she was before the illness, but with continued care, she could live many more comfortable years here." Henry nodded thoughtfully. "And your father? How is he adapting?" "Better than I expected. Nathan has introduced him to several business opportunities. He's considering opening a hardware store with a partner." Violet glanced at Henry, knowing what he was really asking. "They'll be fine, Henry. They're building a new life here." "And what about you?" His blue eyes were serious as he took her hands in his. "Could you build a life here too?" Violet understood the weight of his question. "I think I could be happy anywhere as long as we're together." Henry's expression softened. "I've been thinking about that. A lot, actually." He drew a deep breath. "Fort Stanton has been good to me. The business is established now, with regular customers and a solid reputation. But Prescott is growing faster with more opportunities." "What are you saying?" Violet asked, hardly daring to hope. "I'm saying that when I return to Fort Stanton, it will be to settle my affairs there, not to stay." Henry's voice was firm with conviction. "I've already spoken with a gunsmith here who's looking to retire. His shop is twice the size of mine with an established clientele." Joy bubbled up in Violet's chest. "You're moving to Prescott, if you'll have me." Henry dropped to one knee right there beside the creek, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Violet Graham, I've loved you since we were children, though I didn't fully understand what that meant until we were apart. I promised your father I would wait until your family was settled, and now that they are, I'm asking you properly." He opened the box to reveal a gold band set with a perfect diamond. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," Violet breathed, tears blurring her vision. "Yes, Henry Tucker, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger beside the silver promise ring she still wore, then stood to kiss her properly, sealing their engagement as the Arizona sunset painted the world in the colors of their future. Henry returned to Fort Stanton as planned, but this time, their separation had a definite end. October 15, 1874, was set as their wedding date, enough time for Henry to sell his shop, fulfill his remaining commissions, and relocate to Prescott permanently. The weeks of separation passed more quickly this time, filled with wedding preparations and the establishment of their new home. Henry purchased a modest house not far from Violet's parents, with enough land for future expansion and a detached workshop where he could continue his trade. When he arrived in late September with the last of his possessions, the reunion was joyous. The entire Graham family, along with Edgar's cousin Nathan and his wife, welcomed Henry as one of their own. The wedding was a simple affair held in Prescott's small stone church. Violet wore a gown of ivory silk that her mother had helped sew, with a veil of delicate lace that had belonged to her grandmother. Henry, handsome in a new black suit, waited for her at the altar with an expression of such pure happiness that Violet's heart felt too full for her chest. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice solemn in the hushed church, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." As Violet and Henry exchanged their vows, she thought of that first innocent kiss behind the general store in Fort Stanton, of the years of separation and longing, of the obstacles they had overcome to reach this moment. The journey had been longer and more difficult than either of them could have imagined as teenagers, but it had only strengthened the bond between them. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Henry lifted Violet's veil, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I love you, Mrs. Tucker," he whispered before claiming her lips in a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. The small reception that followed was filled with laughter and good wishes. Beatrice, looking stronger than she had in over a year, danced with Edgar for the first time since her illness. Nathan and his wife presented the newlyweds with a handcrafted quilt for their new home. Even the gunsmith from whom Henry had purchased his shop attended, offering a toast to the young couple's future success. As the celebration wound down, Henry led Violet away from the crowd, finding a quiet moment alone before they departed for their new home. "Do you remember the day we first kissed?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Violet smiled up at him. "Behind the general store, how could I forget? I was terrified my father would catch us," Henry chuckled. "I was 15 years old and thought I was the bravest man alive for kissing Edgar Graham's daughter." His expression grew more serious, more tender. "But I knew even then, Violet. I knew you were the one I wanted to spend my life with." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch as gentle as it had been that day 7 years ago. "They say you never forget your first love. I believe that's true, but I'm more grateful that my first love is also my last." "Your last?" Violet raised an eyebrow, though her heart swelled at his words. Henry nodded, his voice dropping to a whisper that was for her alone. "We shared our first kiss at 15 years. I came back because I want your last too and everyone in between, for all the days of our lives." Violet rose on her tiptoes, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that held all the sweetness of their first and all the promise of their future together. "You have them, Henry Tucker. Every last one." As they drove away from the reception in the wagon Henry had purchased for their new life, the setting sun painted the Arizona sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ahead lay their home, their business, and all the joys and challenges they would face together. Behind them stretched the path that had led them here from those first tentative moments of young love to the deep, abiding commitment they shared now. "Happy?" Henry asked as he helped Violet down from the wagon in front of their house. She looked up at the home they would build together, then back at the man who had traveled so far to be by her side. "Completely." In the years that followed, Henry's gunsmithing business flourished in Prescott. His reputation for quality workmanship spread throughout the territory, bringing customers from as far away as California and Colorado. Violet, drawing on her experience in her father's store, kept the books and managed the business side of their operation, proving herself as much a partner in their success as in their life. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived a year after their wedding, bringing a new dimension of joy to their household. Beatrice, whose health continued to improve in the Arizona climate, doted on her grandson, while Edgar taught the boy to ride almost as soon as he could walk. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth, whose dark hair and blue eyes were the mirror of her father's. The family was complete when their youngest son, Michael, was born in the spring of 1879, a surprise blessing that filled their home with even more laughter and love. As the children grew, so did Prescott, evolving from a frontier settlement into a proper town with schools, businesses, and cultural institutions. Henry and Violet were active in this growth, contributing to the community that had welcomed them so warmly. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, they would often sit on their porch, watching the stars appear over the Arizona landscape, so different from the New Mexico territory where their story had begun. "You ever miss Fort Stanton?" Violet asked one such evening, her head resting on Henry's shoulder. He considered the question, his arm tightening around her. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, the familiarity. But no, I don't truly miss it." He turned to press a kiss to her temple. "Home isn't a place, Violet. It's wherever we're together." She smiled, thinking of all they had built, their business, their family, their life intertwined with the growing history of the American West. From a stolen kiss at 15 to a love that had overcome distance, illness, and uncertainty, their journey had been one of enduring commitment and unwavering faith in each other. "Together," she agreed, tilting her face up for a kiss that, even after years of marriage, still held the wonder of that very first one. Always together. And in that promise, fulfilled each day through all the seasons of their lives, Henry and Violet Tucker found the greatest adventure of all, a love that had survived the wild frontier and would endure for all their days, just as he had vowed on their wedding day when he'd said he wanted not just her first kiss, but her last too.